My wife's sister did everything she could to humiliate me and push me out of the family, but God was on my side, and she paid for it. And now, I'll tell you how it happened. My name is Caleb Morgan, and this dinner wasn't supposed to feel like an ambush. It was supposed to be a celebration, a warm, elegant evening in honor of Margaret Lancaster's 65th birthday, my mother-in-law. I planned everything down to the dessert spoons. Custom menu, live music, candlelit patio in a Napa Valley vineyard. It was perfect, and I paid for all of it. Every wine glass on every table, every handwritten name card, every overpriced chair wrapped in lavender silk, all on me. Because Margaret had always been kind to me. From the first day I met her daughter, Naomi, she treated me like her own. And after 5 years of marriage, it still meant something. But one person in the Lancaster family had a problem with me. Her name was Camille, Naomi's older sister. Camille wasn't cruel in the obvious ways. No slurs, no shouting. She was subtle. Slick. The kind of woman who smiled like a politician and weaponized politeness. Camille didn't just dislike me, she dismissed me. Like I was a side character in a play where she'd already written every role. So when I saw her standing beside the maitre d', whispering with too much confidence and not enough class, I knew she was about to pull something. The maitre d' approached with a tight smile. "Mr. Morgan? Just confirming, you'll be seated at table 9? I blinked. I'm supposed to be at the head table. With my wife. And her mother. Camille swept over before he could answer, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my car. "Caleb," she purred, resting a manicured hand on my forearm. There was a last-minute adjustment. "Table 9 is still wonderful. Great view of the garden." I stared. "That's the table next to the service station." She gave a breathy laugh. "It's all family, darling. Try not to be dramatic." Family. I married Naomi. I wasn't some distant acquaintance. I was family. But Camille never saw it that way. I wasn't born a Lancaster, and in her mind, that meant I didn't count. Naomi was still inside with Margaret. They hadn't heard yet. And Camille knew it. I leaned in. "You're playing a dangerous game." She smiled wider. "No, Caleb. I'm playing hostess. Someone has to." I was about to respond when a waiter approached. "Excuse me, just confirming the special editions. The gold leaf steak, the truffle sampler, and the cristal were all approved under your name, Mr. Morgan." I froze. "Excuse me?" The waiter held up the tablet. "These items were requested by Ms. Camille and charged to your tab." Camille was already sipping her wine like it was no big deal. "Relax, Caleb. You said no budget. I just took you at your word." She walked away without waiting for a response, her heels clicking like applause. I stood there, trying to hold my temper. The dinner hadn't even started. But I already knew, this night wasn't going to end quietly. I took a breath and counted to 5. Camille had made her first move, a petty one. But it wouldn't be her last. I made my way toward the reception tent, where soft jazz played under twinkling lights. Guests were arriving in waves, all smiles and sparkling flutes of champagne. Naomi was laughing with Margaret near the floral arch, both of them glowing. I didn't want to ruin the mood. So I smiled, kissed Naomi on the cheek, and acted like everything was fine. But Camille was watching. And she knew I wouldn't make a scene, not yet. When dinner was announced, guests were guided to their tables. I noticed the glances as people realized I wasn't at the head table. One older cousin did a double take, then quickly looked away. Camille, of course, made a point to laugh extra loudly at the head table, her voice floating across the room like perfume. Or poison. I sat at table 9 alone. No one made eye contact. My plate arrived with a flourish, seared duck, infused with something French I couldn't pronounce. Probably cost $90. But the taste felt like cardboard. I watched as Camille raised her glass and gave a toast, my toast, the one I had planned. Word for word. She smiled while she stole my words, presenting herself as the loving daughter, the family pillar, the orchestrator of it all. People clapped. I clenched my jaw. Then came the main course, and another surprise. The waiter leaned in. Mr. Morgan, would you like us to begin uncorking the 2003 Chateau Margaux you authorized? My stomach dropped. That bottle alone cost $5,600. Camille turned, as if on cue, and winked. That's when I realized this wasn't about food or wine. It was a power play. She wanted to humiliate me, drain me dry in front of everyone while smiling sweetly, daring me to stop her. So I smiled back and let her keep going. Because what Camille didn't know was that the bill wasn't being charged to my card. I had arranged something different, and when the moment came, it would be her turn to smile through her teeth. Camille thought she was winning, and to be honest, so did most of the room. She was glowing under the fairy lights, holding court at the head table like some high society duchess. Every time someone complimented the ambience, the food, the music, she took credit. Naomi kept smiling politely, but I could see it, the quiet tension behind her eyes. She knew something was off, but she didn't know the half of it yet. Halfway through dessert, Margaret stood and tapped her glass for attention. I just want to say how thankful I am, she began. To be surrounded by my family, by love, and by the people who made tonight possible. She looked toward Camille. Camille smiled sweetly, already preparing to stand. And especially, Margaret continued, turning to my son-in-law Caleb, who planned and paid for every detail of this beautiful evening. Camille froze. Applause followed. Real applause. Heads turned toward me. I stood, nodded once, didn't say a word, just let it happen. Naomi beamed. I could see the pride in her eyes. Camille picked up her champagne flute, but her hand was shaking. The waiter returned, same one from before. Mr. Morgan, he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Just confirming again, we're placing all custom orders and extras under Ms. Camille Lancaster's account, as you requested earlier. Correct? I met his gaze. That's correct. Camille's head whipped around. What? The waiter smiled professionally. You approved the Chateau Margaux, the seafood tower, and the truffle tasting, ma'am. Would you like to settle the bill now or at the end of the evening? There was a pause. A long, painful, delicious pause. Then murmurs. People started whispering. Camille's smile cracked. This is ridiculous, she hissed. I didn't. But the waiter had the receipts. Digital. Time-stamped. She had signed for them. Camille stood, trying to gather her composure. I never authorized this, she said sharply, eyes darting between the waiter, me, and the crowd. The waiter, still perfectly calm, held up a sleek tablet. Here's your signature, time-stamped. You approved the additions at 6:42 p.m., and again at 7:05. She reached for the tablet, eyes wide. Her voice dropped. Caleb, what are you playing at? I stayed seated. I didn't need to raise my voice. I'm not playing, I said quietly. You wanted to be in charge. So you're holding the check. Gasps. A few laughs. One elderly aunt actually choked on her wine. Camille looked around, searching for support. Margaret sat in stunned silence. Naomi's lips were pressed in a hard line. No one stood up for her. She turned to Naomi. You're really okay with this? Naomi didn't blink. You humiliated my husband. Lied. Tried to erase him from his own event. And you think I should defend you? Camille's mouth opened, then closed. The damage was visible now, cracks in the glass. The room had shifted. People saw her differently. Not as the flawless hostess, but as what she was, a manipulator. That's when the maitre d' returned. Ms. Lancaster, he said gently. If there's an issue with the bill, we can bring in the manager. Or, if needed, law enforcement. Camille blanched. You wouldn't. I stood up, finally. Straightened my jacket. Looked her in the eye. They might not. But I would. The room went quiet again. And in that silence, something beautiful happened. Margaret stood up. She looked at Camille with decades of motherly exhaustion behind her eyes. I love you, Camille, she said. But tonight, you've shown everyone exactly who you are." And with that, she sat back down. Camille stood frozen. No more words. No more fake smiles. Only silence. Camille turned away, face flushed, lips trembling. Guests were murmuring louder now. Phones were out. At least 3 people had started filming. This was no longer just a scene, it was going viral. She tried one last desperate move. "My card was compromised," she said quickly. "There must have been a mistake." The waiter nodded calmly. "We can run another if you'd like. Or split the bill." He handed her the sleek black folder. Camille opened it, and visibly paled. $17,600, she whispered. Margaret looked shocked. Naomi raised her brows. I stayed silent. The maitre d' stepped forward. "If you prefer, we can settle it privately in the manager's office. Or you can handle it here." Camille gritted her teeth. "I'm not paying for this," she hissed. Then a new voice joined the scene. "Funny. You didn't say that when you ordered it." Everyone turned. Standing near the entrance was a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark suit. Michael. Camille's ex-husband. ***. His timing was perfect. Camille's eyes widened. "What are you doing here?" Michael walked in, slow and deliberate. "Got a call from an old friend. Said my ex was racking up a luxury bill in someone else's name again." That hit like a thunderclap. Gasps. Whispers. A couple of guests straight up stared with open mouths. Camille's facade crumbled. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped. Michael laughed coldly. "You pulled this same stunt at the Charleston Gala. Remember that?" She didn't answer. "Or when you tried to use my corporate card at the fundraiser? You were always good at pretending." Camille looked around the room, realizing just how many people were listening and judging. Michael turned to the maitre d'. "If she doesn't pay, I'll be happy to testify she's done this before. Might even have bank statements to back it up." Camille's jaw clenched. "Get out." He smirked. "Already did. Just thought I'd drop by for the encore." And then he left. Just like that. Camille stood alone, her face pale, her mask shattered. She looked at the maitre d', then at the waiter, then at Margaret, hoping someone, anyone, would save her. But the only thing she found was silence. And eyes. So many eyes. Watching. Judging. The waiter spoke again, voice gentle but firm. "Ma'am, if the bill remains unpaid, we'll need to contact local authorities. This is standard protocol." Camille laughed, a brittle, broken sound. "You can't be serious." The maitre d' replied. "We are." Margaret spoke softly. "Just pay the bill, Camille. End this." But Camille's pride was louder than her shame. "I'm not paying for something I didn't order." I stepped forward, speaking clearly, for everyone to hear. "You did order it. You wanted to prove I didn't belong. That I was some outsider playing rich. But this party was mine. Every part of it. And the moment you tried to erase me, you erased yourself instead." A hush fell. Camille's hands trembled. Naomi stepped beside me, placing a hand on my arm. Her voice was calm but final. "You made this mess, Camille. Now clean it up." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Camille looked around one last time. No allies. No escape. Then, quietly, she picked up her clutch, turned on her heel, and walked out. The maitre d' watched her go, then turned to me. "Mr. Morgan, about the bill?" I smiled. "Charge the original amount to my account, just the plan, menu and drinks." "Everything?" Camille added. "That's her problem now." He nodded. Naomi squeezed my hand. Margaret stood and walked over, wrapping me in a soft, genuine hug. "Your family, Caleb," she whispered. "And I'm sorry it took this long for some people to see it." The next morning, the Lancaster family group chat was quiet. Not a single message. No memes. No recaps. Just silence. Camille was gone. She didn't text Naomi. Didn't call Margaret. Didn't even try to spin the narrative online. But others did. By lunchtime, videos from the party were already on TikTok and Reddit. Rich aunt tries to upstage son-in-law, gets wrecked. When karma wears heels. $22K dinner scam at birthday bash. The comment sections were brutal. Naomi and I watched one together, sipping coffee on our patio. You think she'll come back? Naomi asked. I shook my head. Not soon. Maybe not ever. Good. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I'm sorry it got that far. I looked at her. You weren't the problem. She smiled, eyes a little sad. But I didn't stop it either. Margaret came by that afternoon. No fanfare. No speeches. Just a gentle hug. And a simple sentence. Thank you for protecting our family, even from itself. That night, as I closed my laptop and turned off the porch lights, I thought about everything Camille had tried to do. Control the evening, steal the spotlight, rewrite the story. But in the end, she just became a side note in someone else's chapter. And I stayed. Because some of us don't need to be loud to win. Some of us just wait for the storm to pass. And then set the table again.